Yeah, sure thing.
Hey, you sold that car yet?
Yeah, sold it to Carvana.
Oh, I thought you were selling to that guy.
The guy who wanted to pay me in foreign currency, no interest, over 36 months? Yeah, no. Carvana gave me an offer in minutes, picked it up, and paid me on the spot. It was so convenient.
Just like that.
Yeah?
No hassle.
None.
That is super convenient.
Sell your car to Carvana and swap hassle for convenience. Pickup fees may apply.
We all love goal setting and having big ideas for our future. Yet, things don't always go to plan. This depressing future reality of failure is not due to poor imagination or bad ideas. It's actually due to a lack of awareness in the present moment of what you should be doing. Richard Feynman stated that the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Today, we're going to break out of our daydreaming and create a reality that we actually want. Hello, and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. I am Sam Webster Harris, and it's great to be in your ears today. I dived into this subject because I wanted to understand my own failures and the silly reasons why completely possible plans for my future just don't always seem to happen. Ultimately, most of our failures come down to a detachment from reality. This lack of awareness appears in two major ways: unrealistic ideas of what is actually going to happen, and number two, not being ready for the moment when it's happening. So that's poor appreciation that I'm now here in the specific moment I'd imagined in my future where I would do something different. So number one, unrealistic ideas. In our minds, we see success and happiness coming at us really fast and more easy than happens in reality. Our imagination is lovely, but reality is slower and full of mundane, unexciting stuff. The experience of the journey is duller than we imagine, and the destination can be short-lived, and we might find it was actually something we didn't even want that much. Realizing that an idea wasn't actually what we wanted is usually the moment where it fails. And if you see my past episodes on journey versus destination or dreaming versus doing in the backlog, you can get a full lowdown on this concept. But the even bigger thing that I'm going to really tackle in this episode is this. Number two, not being ready for the moment. Now, awareness is really elusive. The fact that you are here in this very moment that you had planned for just slips us by in our day-to-day. Why? Well, the things in your mind when it's telling you what you're going to do in the future is actually there to make you feel good. It isn't necessarily meant to really change your life in the future. Those thoughts give you the feeling that your future will be great, which means that any current problems with the situation in your life right now, they're fine because you'll deal with them later. And whether it was a diet that you're going to start or a career break after hitting a milestone, those are ideas that make whatever you're doing now feel okay. They validate the current scenario and they tell you that it's not a problem and it's not something you need to fix. Furthermore, the cost or benefit today of doing this different action is actually kind of negligible. The difference between going for a run or having a single donut right now on any given day is genuinely not going to impact tomorrow. So the impact of these habitual choices, it just isn't directly in front of us. That means it's easy to put these things off for your future plans when it will be easier. But when that moment in the future becomes today, you're supposed to be doing something different. And what actually happens in reality is the same as before for several reasons. We don't realize that the sensations of reality will have more pain in them. You weren't so hungry in that future moment when you were going to be eating less. And right now, it's nicer to quiet that hunger monster by maybe starting the diet tomorrow and eating right now. And other times, reality is scarier. In our imagination, we were brave enough to casually approach that good-looking person, and we had something really clever to say. But right now, currently, feeling a little bit shy, awkward, no clever words are coming to my mind, which has just gone completely blank. And so you sit there quietly unnoticed. Or another reason is that you might just be too busy to make your ideas happen. Carving out that magical hour for your writing practice or exercise, it just slips by to the next year because everything is so hectic right now. There's so many demands on your time. And quickly, this year has just become a write-off. And we decide next year will be the one where we get our head down and carve out that hour for ourselves. And then other times we just simply forget that we're going to do something different. It doesn't even register that we were supposed to be doing something that was different. Like that time I was meant to become fluent in Spanish that just has never appeared and it hasn't happened. And what's annoying is that there's no physical limit stopping you. It's just so frustrating because there's nothing actually in the way of making those ideas happen. It's really just yourself. And it's not something that's even difficult for yourself to do. It's mostly just a lack of planning, a lack of knowing what to do and when, a lack of then making room to go and do the thing, and finally, a lack of an accountability with a lack of a deadline where you have to be held accountable too. So for me, those fantasy ideas which fail is mostly because I just don't know where the start line is or where to fit something in with all the other things that are going on. And it does take a while to adjust to a new state. For example, I've been writing a newsletter now for 30 weeks and it's only just started to feel unsurprising that I'm writing it each week. And other things that I plan in my head to do that can be more elusive just remain out of touch for a long time until I really make them happen, like athletic challenges or starting my YouTube. I had to really sit down and be like, shit, when am I actually doing this? And make it happen. Because those things are purely my responsibility and no one else is involved that will help me get there. Ultimately, everything that is required to make the jump from your imagination to reality is on your plate. And if you've never done it before, it's hard to actually imagine or plan for what it really entails. That leads to bad planning or no planning, which makes it hard to make those things happen in the moment that they should be happening in. And time just continues to fly by as you wonder why your goal is just a similar distance away to where it was before. And there is this mysterious gap in between your current state and arriving at that destination. Because no one tells you what to do. There's no accountability or any real external reminder or reference because it's all in your head. And finally, there's just no momentum on doing it. The more that you do something, the easier it gets. And things will improve once you've started making some headway and you've done it a few times. And you'll know where it's going to fit into your day or week. And you can make a clever schedule around where it should get done. Also, people will then find out that you're doing it because you're actually doing it. And it becomes part of your identity. Like, I literally am a person who writes a newsletter. And so if someone asks me what are the things that I do mention sometimes that I write a newsletter, and it increases my accountability, and everyone that's on it is increasing the amount of reasons I have each week to send it. And so it has gathered momentum. Right.
Now, I want to go into a few case studies that will really demonstrate the psychology behind some of the principles we've spoken about, whilst also giving you a better idea of how they appear in reality, and of course, what to do about them. Way back in 1838, Charles Darwin knew he had discovered something revolutionary about the development of life on Earth. But he also suffered from a lack of knowing what to do, whilst also not having any deadlines or accountability to doing it. And this led to some wild delays on putting his theories together. Sure, he could write about them. He wrote thousands of pages of notes over 2 decades, but he couldn't write his actual theory. The task was too big, too important, too scary, and the undefined megatask registered in his brain as a threat, triggering what psychologists now call task initiation paralysis. And in this peculiar form of paralysis, it's where the magnitude of a task renders us unable to begin it. I certainly get this a lot with basically any new thing, or of course, writing. I can stare at a blank page, the empty canvas, the unstarted project, and admittedly feel myself shrinking before its endless possibilities. But back with Darwin, his wife, Emma Darwin, might be history's most underrated productivity coach. She saw her husband, Charles, struggling with the infinite task ahead of him, and she helped make it finite. She set what now became his very infamous schedule for him, which was incredibly simple. Have breakfast, then write until 12:30. And after that, he was allowed to go on walks, collect specimens, make however many notes he liked. And so, to be a bit romantic, I might suggest it was a profound act of love in saying, I will help you make the impossible possible by making it ordinary. In our age of optimization and productivity hacks, there is something beautiful about that. The world-changing magic of showing up every day after breakfast until 12:30. So as we see here, getting the best work out of us doesn't necessarily need to be complicated. In fact, it often needs to be incredibly simple. As long as it gives us room to do the thing, some accountability, and some awareness of what we should be doing, we can usually do it. And on that, we can talk about how writing 2 sentences managed to double heart patients' survival rate, which was a crazy psychology study that just shows how bananas our brains are. On a cardiac recovery ward, researchers found a really important nuance about the gap between our intentions and our actions. So we'll take 2 basically identical patients and show how they were treated differently in the study. Both of these patients had just had the same heart surgery and were very interested in staying alive and doing their exercises after this surgery. Jim was prescribed a when-then plan, and he would write a sentence about his exercises that would say something like, when I finish breakfast, I'll do my exercises for at least 10 minutes every day to start with and work up from there, and when I feel pain, then I will do my breathing techniques. That's all he wrote. And Tom, the counterpart, simply wrote, I will definitely do my exercises. And that was it. Now, in this study, 91% of the Jims who said, when, then, they succeeded in doing all their exercises and had much better health outcomes, whilst only 39% of the Toms made it through the program. And it's just this little bit of writing difference. Jim had his breakfast and on autopilot went to his exercises, so they happened. In Tom's brain, he had some vague, good intentions, but exercises were uncomfortable. It's easy to wait for another day when he maybe felt stronger. And there's Netflix and other demands on your time, etc. And the reason this is so important is that these 2 groups of heart patients were all really, really motivated to stay alive and had very good reasons to start exercising. And they were all given the exact same recovery program. But only one group just wrote the specific when, then intention, which is just a tiny, tiny contract with themselves about when and where they do their exercises. And the other group just committed to trying their best. And yet there is such a stark difference in outcomes. 91% went and did it versus 39% as a success rate. And this really tells us about the nature of change itself. We can have the noblest intentions in the world, but they can crumble in the face of something as simple as just an unstructured afternoon. The path between who we are and who we want to be, it's not paved with motivation in the slightest. It's paved with small, specific promises we make to ourselves that have a specific moment that we can recognize when to make it happen. So in the end, some of the most profound changes in our lives don't come from grand declarations of intent, but just humble sentences that begin with, when this happens, then I'll do this. And on that, when we reach about the midpoint in the podcast, then I do play some adverts to keep the podcast running. So we shall be back after a short break to discuss more ideas from psychology, as well as practical tips and resources that you can rely on to help you take action on your plans this year. So please stay tuned. Last year, save more money was the most popular New Year's resolution in America. It's very understandable. A lot of us feel our money is slipping through our fingers and the whole world is pretty much trying to get you to spend your money. There's streaming apps, delivery fees, shopping sites designed to drive addictions. So luckily for us, my sponsor Acorns helps you build healthier investing habits. You'll have heard me talk about Acorns before, and I'm happy to be partnered with them this year as we grow together. Acorns makes it easy to start automatically saving and investing so your money has a chance to grow for you, your kids, and your retirement. You don't need to be an expert. Acorns will recommend a diversified portfolio that fits you and your money goals. You also don't need to be rich. Acorns lets you invest with the spare money you've got right now, and you can start with $5 or even just your spare change. So head to acorns.com/growth or download the Acorns app to start saving and investing for your future today. Paid non-client endorsement. Compensation provides incentive to positively promote Acorns. Tier 1 compensation provided. Investing involves risk. Acorns Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. View important disclosures at acorns.com/growth.
Wow. What's up?
I just bought and financed a car through Carvana in minutes.
You? The person who agonized 4 weeks over whether to paint your walls eggshell or off-white bought and financed a car in minutes?
They made it easy. Transparent terms, customizable down and monthly. Didn't even have to do any paperwork.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Hey, have you checked out that spreadsheet I sent you for our dinner options?
Finance your car with Carvana and experience total control. Financing subject to credit approval.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon. Sometimes the most painful part of getting sick is the getting better part. Waiting on hold for an appointment, sitting in crowded waiting rooms, standing in line at the pharmacy, that's painful. Amazon One Medical and Amazon Pharmacy remove those painful parts of getting better with things like 24/7 virtual visits and prescriptions delivered to your door. Thanks to Amazon Pharmacy and Amazon One Medical, healthcare just got less painful.
Right, so staying with the 1830s as a decade, because why not, we also have the writer Victor Hugo. He found himself in a somewhat similar predicament to Charles Darwin. He had a lot of plans and notes, but in his case, he was trying to write The Hunchback of Notre Dame. But for him, his problem wasn't how to wrestle with this giant theory of the world. He had an outline for what his story was, he knew what he had to do, but his issue was that Paris kept distracting him with endless soirees and social obligations. Much like Paris itself, he came up with a solution that was both elegant and a little absurd. He locked away all of his clothes, leaving himself with only a shawl for warmth. His contract with himself was that he could not leave his house until his daily writing was complete. And until that had happened, his options were to write or be mostly naked, which of course stopped him from being able to leave the house. This contract he had with himself was incredibly effective. Because he did this, he finished the book months ahead of schedule, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame is a very famous story. Again, this shows us something about the nature of willpower. Sometimes the best way to achieve something, it's not through force of will. Motivation, as we've already established, is pretty crap, but instead through just careful curation of our own constraints and environment. We call these types of contracts with ourselves Ulysses Contracts because they're an example of the story, the Greek myth of Ulysses, who had his sailors tie him to the mast of a ship so he wouldn't succumb to the hypnotizing song of the sirens. It's really a way of allowing your rational brain to decide what you do and handcuffing your monkey brain before it messes everything up. Modern research has shown that these self-imposed restrictions can increase our goal completion by 75%. Which is a pretty huge increase and shows that just relying on motivation is not a good strategy. The thing I want to highlight here is how important this is in our age of infinite distractions. Whatever your work is, we're all in some way trying to create our own masterpieces or simply do our work whilst carrying social media sirens in our pocket and other hypnotizing sources of distractions. So I think there is really something profound about Victor Hugo's solution. The true freedom we want often comes from limiting the options available to us by deliberately cutting them off in service of what matters most to us. Then we have the freedom to focus on what we want to do. And so I'm increasingly putting my phone onto airplane mode or writing without even a phone or a laptop vaguely near me and with no internet at all, because I do really struggle with this. With all the best intentions in the world to get my podcast done ahead of schedule, somehow I can spend days answering email, checking news, doing I don't know what, life admin-y things that hit me on the internet that don't if I just sit down with a pen and paper. So if you think of anything in your life that you find very easy to schedule but hard to actually make yourself do without some distractions, consider creating a Ulysses contract with yourself and making it impossible to do the things that usually limit you from doing it. Because certainly in Victor Hugo's case, it turns out that the secret to writing a masterpiece isn't inspiration as such as just some strategic nudity. Okay, on that, onto some of my other favorite strategies and resources that are definitely available to you to help make things actually happen. And then I'll round this all up with an overview of a theory psychology had wrong for 20 years and how to fix it.
Right. So how do I make sure that I start these ideas in my head and make real progress? Number one, get it out of your head. Relying on any mental notes or ideas is a total fail. Just don't let it happen. when things are in your brain, it doesn't actually see all the flaws that are hidden there. And the older that I become, the more afraid I am of anything that my mind tells me without having it written down and really seeing it in the light of day. So firstly, write down the idea, then try and put a schedule around it where it just has to happen and tell people that you're doing it. And finally, make sure you allocate at least 4 times more time than you expect to make it happen. And you might have to cut something out of your day. The only thing stopping you from doing anything is yourself. So you have to make sure that you're telling yourself that it is happening and work out what to sacrifice. Number 2, cohort learning. Now, if you've tried starting a task or idea a few times and find yourself just failing, I'd really recommend joining a cohort of other people doing the same thing. And yes, it does cost some money, but when you're on a cohort, they will give you a schedule around what you already want to be doing that you have to follow. So you have a start line, you have targets and accountability, and it's like signing up for a marathon, but in a skill or whatever it is that you want to have. Whilst you're doing it, you have a bunch of peers around you on the same journey who you're helping, they're helping you, and it's just adding more accountability. You're pushed to move faster and harder than you would do by yourself. And also, they answer the really important questions that you have of, what do I do now? Which is often the moments where you're like not sure what to do next and you just leave it unanswered and like it pushes to next week. And when you can get those questions answered, it really stops you from falling off and it helps you keep momentum. Now, a cohort won't do the work for you, but they make you aware that you're here right now in the moment that you need to do that job. You can't hide behind the flaws of your elusive ideas that this will be easier to start tomorrow. It needs to be done now. I'll put some links in the show notes of my favorite cohorts for things like writing, starting a YouTube or podcasting. My next tip is coaching. This is a really great option by having a weekly call with a coach who will quiz you about all of your private plans. They'll sit with you, they'll write out these plans, they'll check on your progress. It's very simple and very effective. And if you're on a budget, you honestly don't need an expert coach to solve most of your problems. Most of the answers all lie within you. You just need a coach who isn't a complete idiot and listens to you and asks good questions. If you are trying to do something that's monumentally difficult or really out of your skill set, then I would advise paying for a really good coach. But honestly, most things that are wrong with your life could be fixed with a very budget coach. Also note that if your issues are very personal and to do with your history, you might want to instead find a therapist who can help you overcome your problems rather than a coach. Right. Next tip, accountability groups. Now, if you don't have the money to pay for anything else, you can always start a group with some friends for free. And you need to find some friends that are on a similar sort of path to you who want to fix the thing that you're trying to do. And start a small group, and I would say no more than 5 people, where you lay out your plans together and you need them to be genuinely interested in helping you achieve your goal and what you want to do with your life. And in return, you need to be genuinely interested in the people in your group. The good thing is this is completely free. The bad thing is because it's free and it's with your friends, it is the easiest one to slide into the not quite happening box. And you really need to plan an actual catch up each week to keep track of each other's goals. And if you don't, it just falls off the radar because, these people are busy, you're busy, there's no money on the line, there's no sense of urgency, like, oh God, must be done this week. Whereas with a coach, they're going to set a calendar, you paid for their time each week, but your mate, they have a life to get on with. So really make sure you're taking it seriously if you use an accountability group. And you can also up the stakes by using the Stick app. That's Stick, spelled S-T-I-C-K-K. The Stick app, where you put money on the line each day or each week for a task that you want to do. And if you don't do it, that money gets paid to a charity or an anti-charity. If you do it, you get to keep all of your money and it stays free. So it just helps add some accountability and should stay free because you should actually commit to doing the thing you're going to do. My final sort of alternative thing that you might not be doing already is future letters to yourself. There's a great website called future.me where you can send a letter to yourself in a week, 6 months, a year, 5 years. And it's just really insightful into showing you how you think and giving you an insight on yourself and being more aware of like reality. In a private email to yourself, you can really put yourself out there. You can talk about your crazy dreams, your expectations for the future. You can really say what you desire, what you want to do, what you're expecting. And then when you receive that in a year's time, having forgotten what you put, you're going to be a lot wiser. Lots of things will have happened in your year. And you'll read this like crazy email from yourself about what you're dreaming about. And you'll be like, whoa. You'll see the massive naivety you had in some areas. You'll see what turned into massive failures. And you'll have a good idea of why. And it'll just help add a real sense of what you succeed in and what you keep on failing in that you just will miss in the day-to-day if like years just slide by without you noticing. And having things like that just really adds awareness to your reality, which is what this episode is about. Now, finally, there's just a few other ones that I'm pretty sure you're probably aware of by now, but things like meditating each day is a great way to keep yourself more in reality. And again, journaling is something that people keep on talking about. If you write about your thoughts every day, you're going to really introspect and get your ideas onto paper. Another one is just putting time blocks in your calendar for the things that you want to do so it can't get filled up with other meetings or other things, and sticking to it. And goal tracking, that one, obviously your goal setting, but goal tracking is the act of checking in regularly, like each day, each week, each month on those goals and seeing what you're doing actively towards making them happen. And it's really important. And finally, booking events such as signing up to a marathon. So you just have to bloody go running. And I thought I would just mention them just to nudge you that if you know you should be doing them, here's a reminder that you should be doing them. So there's plenty of ways to keep yourself aware of what reality is and be within it.
Okay, now that I think we've covered most of the lesser known and well-known strategies for creating accountability and getting yourself to do things, I want to talk about temporal discounting, and this will really wrap up the whole episode. Now, temporal discounting, if you don't know the specific language for it, is actually a greatly misunderstood concept in psychology that you will have heard of. There is the incredible famous Marshmallow study. It's the one where a child was given a marshmallow, left alone for 15 minutes, and promised if they could wait for those 15 minutes that they would have 2 marshmallows if they didn't eat it. And the study proved that the kids that had good willpower to wait those 15 minutes went on to have much better lives because they had greater patience and willpower. But this test has haunted developmental psychology for over half a century, like a sugary ghost of determinism. We thought what we were measuring was willpower, but what we were actually measuring was trust. In the 2018 replication study, the lead researcher watched her own daughter take the test and knew her daughter didn't actually have the best willpower in the world, but the child was raised in a very stable environment where promises were always kept, and so she actually waited patiently for the second marshmallow. Meanwhile, she saw children from less reliable backgrounds where words like later often meant never, and so they grabbed the marshmallow immediately. So this researcher added some parameters to the marshmallow study and proved that actually kids from reliable backgrounds found it very easy to trust others. And so when they were given a promise of greater volumes of marshmallows, their brains would say, hey, these scientist people seem very legitimate. I'm sure they'll follow through with their promises. Great, I'll take 2 marshmallows. But kids who come from environments where adults often break their promises, they had a very skeptical approach to promises. Their brain would say like, eat it now. Who knows if they're ever coming back? So what the marshmallow study actually showed us is something much more profound about how we navigate time and trust. It shows how our past experiences shape our ability to believe in future rewards. So something that looked like impulsivity might actually be a rational response to an unreliable world. I think about this whenever I make promises to myself about tomorrow, next year, or someday in the future. Our ability to trust in future rewards isn't just about willpower, it's about creating an environment where we can trust ourselves to follow through. In the end, the real marshmallow test isn't about resisting temptation, but about becoming someone who keeps their own promises. So I really, really hope that the ideas we've talked about in this episode help you find strategies to keep your own promises with yourself. Ultimately, you are the only person responsible for who you become. But if you keep consistently proving to yourself that you aren't capable of acting on your promises, You have no trust that you're really going to start going to the gym this year, or learn to code, or write that book, or whatever it is you say you're going to do. This is why it's much better to start small and always maintain your promises and actually get those results, and build up from a foundation of reliability than to try and get everything done instantly in the first week. And the moment you start failing, you're like, oh, I'm bad at this. And so you stop. As we've learned in this episode, we really have to keep ourselves grounded in reality, in the here and now. Be the person that's doing the task that will take you on the journey to whatever that destination you want it to be. And don't worry about it taking longer. Just worry about putting that next step in day by day. Do things like writing simple when, then style sentences, or set a regular schedule like Darwin, or really commit to a contract with yourself like Victor Hugo, who remained mostly naked until he'd done his task. There are plenty of ways to keep yourself aware of reality. I hope these ideas helped. Let me know if you use anything else to stop your imagination getting the better of you. I am always open to new ideas, and I'd love to see any of them in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you have an epic day, week, month, and year. And remember that if you want to enjoy your life, that does start with enjoying today. Thank you so much for listening.
Go you!
Your consistency to reach the end of an episode is legendary.
My hero!
But when we learn things, it's important to reflect. So I politely invite you to take a pause, rifle through the biggest ideas you just heard. So here's your opportunity to hit pause and have a think. Okay, did you wrestle with some insights? Information doesn't stick when we race from one podcast to the next without using our brain to play with the knowledge. So here's another go at a pause. Alrighty, I'll let you off to continue with your life now. If you have any ideas or feedback for the show, I'm always interested to hear from you.
You're the best!
And other than that, please stay curious. Curious. Quote. Smiling for no reason.
If you're a facilities manager at a university, you know students rely on the cafeteria for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and the occasional late-night snack. So when a dishwasher breaks down and dirty plates pile up, the mess hall can turn messy in the blink of an eye. Enter Grainger. With over 1 million industrial-grade products and fast delivery, the product you need now is never far away. So you can turn that dishwasher back into a lean, clean washing machine. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.